So I'm very pleased that this week my guest is somebody I've been trying to interview for quite a long time, BHA Chief Executive Julie Harrington. Thank you so much for giving us your time this week.
No problem at all, looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely, as am I. I've got to start in only one place, and I'm sure you know it's coming. Why did you vote against a reduction in the race programme last week?
So, my view is that constantly racing is looking at what are we going to do for fixtures next year? What are we going to do for fixtures next year? And every year we go through a fixtures process. This year, in conjunction with the fixtures process, we've also been looking at the governance and the decision making of the sport, and also in recent weeks announced that we've reached a point in that process where we're confident in saying we're going to work together for a longer term strategy for the sport, and that the BHA should be central to leading and coordinating that work, and to push on with a short-term 1 year view when we're on the cusp of working together for a longer-term, more strategic approach, which actually might mean that we need bigger cuts or fewer cuts, or it's really about trying to make sure that what we're doing is strategic. I think if we weren't as far along in the work that we've been doing on industry strategy, we would have probably been in a position where you'd say, well, just let next year's programme go and we'll make this tactical intervention because we feel it's the right thing to do. But we've made such progress in the last few months, I think just pausing. We have got until October when programme book 1 for the first 4 months of the year it is going to be published, and I just think that we've got to give that strategy work the best possible chance of success.
Do you envisage that we might have less fixtures because of this strategical sort of pullback, or about the same, or could you even see more?
I think I'm going into it with a completely open mind. I think what's incredibly important to get to the answer to that question is that people are sharing their data. So betting providers, media rights, horse population, nobody can make the best decision if they're only looking at it through one lens. And lots of different people's business models would say, well, actually, we would like solution X, we would like solution Y. And so I think it's going to need people to share their data, but also to park some of their short-term interests in favour of a longer-term view for the sport.
A lot of people have pushed back quite hard about that, and you might say that they won't see necessarily the strategic reasons for it, but do you feel like you've lost a lot of people's confidence over this particular decision? And if so, do you think you can get them back on board?
So I think one of the things I love about racing is that people are passionate, and of course people have strong views, and one of the challenges in working in a national governing body in any sport is your decisions aren't going to be popular all the time. I can look at all of our participants in the eye and say that I, personally, my decision was to pause the process for the right reasons, and hopefully we'll continue to keep talking. As I say, keep sharing the information. But one of the challenges in leadership in sport is your decisions aren't always going to please everybody.
Speaking about that, there are an awful lot of interest in British racing, as you've just remarked upon. If you had the chance to sort of go again and start tomorrow, which organisations or whatever would you sort of invent, and which ones would you say, okay, maybe less of this, and where do you think the power ought to lay? Because some people might say the current system doesn't work and there are too many. In Julie Harrington's ideal world, who's doing what for British racing?
So we are an incredibly fragmented sport. Other racing jurisdictions have fewer moving parts, if you like. And the upside for us is that you would say we have a huge amount of heritage that has got us to this point, and a lot of our assets, in terms of whether that's listed races, whether that's amazing venues, have been centuries in the making, not just decades, and that is a huge asset for British racing. However, the fragmented nature, the fact that you've got race courses, you've got different members of the thoroughbred group in terms of that decision making, we need to be able to hear everybody's voice, but I also strongly believe that the national governing body needs to be empowered to make decisions for the sport. I don't think, speaking hypothetically, sort of imagining that you had a management takeover of racing and you get your red pen out and which bits you'd cross out, is going to be particularly helpful, because we aren't starting from scratch, and people's business, people have shareholders, people have invested tens of millions of pounds in businesses, and so you can't just go with your red pen and say we need less of this or more of this. However, what I think we can do is look for obvious areas of duplication, and talk about how we might eliminate some of that duplication. Look for areas where we can say, well, actually, this body is the best body to lead on subject X. That's the sort of work that we've been doing for the last couple of years on, for example, horse welfare, where rather than reinvent the wheel, we have retraining of race horses. So actually saying, well, they are the body that we'd like to work with to enhance their brief to look after the whole of aftercare, for example. And that we need to just make sure we've got the right people doing the right things, and it's a bit more coordinated.
Moving back just to racing and a sort of more racing issue, but a lot of British horses have left, particularly on the flats, well, mainly on the flat, to go racing overseas, chasing bigger prize money elsewhere. Does it worry you? Do these numbers worry you? Because they've been on a steady uptick and it doesn't seem to be changing.
Yes, it does, and I think it's been a big operation to actually, first of all, make sure that we're looking at one version of the truth in terms of that data. Because to a certain extent, for our breeding industry, exporting horses has got to be part of a good thing, for part of your business model. And indeed other jurisdictions, for example Ireland, part of their government funded is linked to them having high exports. For us, one of the things that we've been really looking at in the data is when it's constantly looking as if your better horses are going overseas. Because what we want, all of our fans, whether they're people who bet on racing, watch on TV, go to the race courses, we want them to be able to see the best horses in the best races. We are a sport, it's a meritocracy. And of course you'll need year-round racing and betting interest, but those pinnacles through the year are the foundations that the sport is built on. And to have an increasing number of your better horses being exported, of course, is worrying. The challenge is, what do you do about that when you're not comparing apples with apples in terms of the way that British racing is funded to other jurisdictions where you have monopoly, like total monopoly positions, and so that's why we need that 10-year or more strategy to say if we are going to stem this decline, if we are going to have our biggest races competing on that global prize money level, then we need to do something differently.
What do you think the thing that needs to be done differently is?
So what you will always find is people arguing over how prize money or revenues are distributed in racing, and what we've got is a finite pot of money. So what we really need to concentrate on is how do we collectively grow that, and understanding that the top of end of our sport is one of the pillars that is built on, but also, you know, great breeding, the British bred thoroughbred being in demand, our stallions, but also the fact that we've got, you know, one of the things I love about racing in this country is it isn't homogenous. You know, you've got such a variety of venues. You know, obviously we've got jump racing and hurdling, and you know, that adds to that variety. And so I think embracing the everyday racing. You know, I spend a lot of time going racing myself, and it doesn't mean I'm always going to the big festivals. I absolutely love, you know, going to Cartmel on a bank holiday weekend, which isn't one of your big TV slots necessarily. So I think there is a place for everything, but we just need to understand, you know, what are those big products that we need to collectively push.
I think, again, the big product stuff is a fair point, but just on the prize money point, just again to labour it, some people might say that too much money is going into, say, for example, the big festivals like the Ebor and Royal Ascot, the top level flat racing, and also at jumping level, it's even worse, where you know, you get your big festivals at Christmas, then you get them in the spring, and there's very little to go around elsewhere. Do you think there might be a way of combating that imbalance, possibly? Because many owners are saying, well, we can't make this pay anymore.
So what you're talking about, some of those big festival fixtures, you also get criticism that those peak fixtures aren't competing internationally. So, you know, you mentioned the Ebor, you mentioned Royal Ascot, Cheltenham. We need to make sure that those pinnacle meetings remain internationally competitive. But you're right that we also need to make sure that every area of the fixture list, whatever rating your horse is, that there are opportunities for it to run and race. But whilst we're constantly looking at how do we spread the prize money thinly, it will always be a challenge, which is why you know, I've been advocating a longer term, more strategic view of the size and shape of the fixture list.
Does that include a sort of different offer to government when it comes to the levy, a sort of different proposal to reform the levy?
So that could be, you know, as you know, the current levy, the government had said that 2024 will be the sort of backstop for when they next look at the levy. We've been asking them to, particularly in the face of the pandemic, to look earlier than that, because we just think the amount of revenue that is now online versus in shops, that we need to make sure that the levy is fit for a digital age. And you're right, that could form part of a solution, but I don't think it will be all of it.
And just going on, because you said something really interesting about where you go racing, and I do think it's important to raise. The race day experience has been raised a lot recently, with sort of varying degrees of success. Some people are, of course, lots of people having a fantastic time, others not so good on a variety of levels, whether it be they feel very high concession prices, and whether it be high entry fees, whether it be sort of race courses that are too packed or whatever. And I was interested to know, first of all, apart from Cartmel, as you've said, which courses do you think do racing really well in this country? And also, where do you think, not naming anywhere in particular, the race day experience can be improved?
So the race day experience is essential, and I think all of our colleagues at racecourses know that. And I would say, you know, historically I spent 10 years working in racecourses, so I know that people aren't resting on their laurels, and I know that investment in those sort of front of house consumer offerings is come on leaps and bounds. Personally, I, as you would expect in this role, I spend a lot of time on race courses, and I'm not going to single out anybody good or bad. I think the ones who put on a great race day experience, it's not always about luxury. You know, it's not always, it's actually about great customer service, being able to get a drink at the bar, not feeling as if you're being ripped off, that you're being served by staff who are well trained, and they're the little things, you know, and often it isn't that top end experience. It might just be that you've happened to go and get a really good pork bap somewhere and had a conversation with the people who are looking after you, and you feel as if it's good value for money. I think there's been quite a lot written recently about not just the experience from a sort of food, beverage, leisure point of view. We're a sport, and the experience of watching the sport, and I do feel providing a big screen so that people can watch the race. Particularly with courses that you know, maybe have a challenging run-in or something to get the idea of the placings. I know myself as a punter, I like being able to see where my horse is. If it's the charge of the Light Brigade on the way in. And so I do think that's an essential part of the race day experience. And I know that particularly for some smaller courses, you know, you're racing a finite number of days in the year, and meeting that investment is challenging. But I think it's a really important area for people to enjoy the best of an afternoon of sport.
There are plenty of race days which are premium products. There are also plenty of race days which I think are targeted at people who might be going for more of a casual day out. With the cost of living crisis really biting at the moment, and also unfortunately sectors get much worse at the beginning of the jumping season, are there any measures that the BHA has, or is there any thinking that you guys have got in terms of strategic reviews to sort of help reduce the cost of racing? Because many people are already saying it's too expensive just to get through the gate, and that's before all the other costs are passed on. You know, food's more expensive, drinks more expensive, and at the end of the day you go and you park and you've done a ton 50, and what else can you do?
So, I mean, that is outside, that would be a bit of an overreach of our powers, if you like, because we don't set ticket prices, we don't have those powers. But one of the functions of the RCA, the Racecourse Association, is, you know, it's not just about, you know, collective bargaining or whatever from the racecourses. It's about them having all of those minds able to work together to work out what's best practice, what's working for some race courses that others can copy. And I think innovation around making it more affordable is certainly on the agenda. So I meet colleagues from both the race courses and the thoroughbred group regularly, and certainly the you know, the cost of living and looking at customers' ability to you know, still come racing is really high up their agenda.
It's a very good place to end part one. Thank you very much for your time. Julie Harrington.
No problem.